Here are 5 ways that might help you improve insulin resistance and take back control of your health the natural way. Hi, welcome to the Exam Room Live Health All Stars series. I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for raising your health IQ with us here in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. This is, in fact, episode 6 of our Health All Stars series here from the Physicians Committee. And today we are going to be looking at how to reverse diabetes the natural way, right? Cyrus Khambatta, co-founder of Mastering Diabetes, is here with us today. He's got 5 tips that you should be focused on to take control today. And a lot of these tips, these solutions, come from the very same place that is actually causing this epidemic of diabetes. And that place, of course, is your plate, your kitchen, the drive-through. What it is that you're eating is that place. And so we're focusing on that today with these 5 tips. And we're also going to be answering a lot of the burning questions that you may have. So with that, let's go ahead and welcome the co-founder of Mastering Diabetes. He is a friend of the show and definitely a health all-star, Mr. Cyrus Khambatta, PhD. Welcome to the Exam Room, my friend.
Chuck, my man, it's so good to be with you. I love coming here. Thank you for the invitation.
It's my pleasure. It's always a good time when you're here, man. I feel like there's certain guests who come on this show who just have a knack for connecting with the audience and being able to deliver information in a digestible, fun fashion. And one of the people who we get a lot of feedback about in that regard is you, man. So it's truly my honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm actually just an AI robot, but I appreciate that people think I'm actually real. So this is good stuff.
That is one heck of a computer job you got going there.
Yeah, I don't mess around,
developer. All right, man. So we are talking about insulin resistance today, taking control of diabetes with five tips here. Your 5 tips are proven time and again by science and everything that you've got going on with Mastering Diabetes. Let's dive right in here at the top. Number 1 tip is?
Okay, number 1 tip. This has been proven by science since the 1920s, and it has continued to show up in the research world over and over and over and over and over again in thousands of scientific papers. It's very simple. Number 1, eat a diet that contains primarily plant material. That simple. Okay. The reason I say that is because there were experiments that started as early as the 1920s by researchers named J.P. Himsworth and Ian Rabinowitz, that then progressed into studies by Inder Singh and James W. Anderson and Dr. Neal Barnard as we move forward in time. And a lot of these studies demonstrate the same thing over and over and over again, which is that when you consume animal products in your diet, even though it might help suppress your blood glucose in the short term and suppress your A1C in the short term and suppress your insulin use or your insulin concentrations in the short term, all of those are short-term effects. So if the real key, the real question we're trying to ask is, how do you reverse diabetes? How do you reverse the underlying disease process called insulin resistance? Then we can't look at short-term effects. We have to take off of our short-term goggles and put on our long-term goggles and make sure that we have a plan that's going to work tomorrow and a plan that's going to work 15 years into the future. And of all the diets and all the fad methodology that's come out over the last 10 to 20 to 30 years relating to a low carbohydrate diet or the Atkins diet or the paleo diet or a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, which are all incarnations of the same methodology over and over and over again, every single one of these diets has a very small, if any, amount of long-term research. And the reason is because, number 1, it's very hard to stick to a diet that contains a lot of animal-based foods. It can actually become very challenging. There's a lot of people who try it for a little while and then they give it up because they find that it's too difficult. And number 2, the research actually demonstrates that people who eat more animal-based foods, higher fat diets, more saturated fat, more animal-based protein, end up with worse biomarkers, even if their biomarkers improve in the short term. So this same pattern emerges over and over and over again, which is that you can suppress your glucose and your A1C and your insulin levels and your blood pressure and sometimes even your cholesterol levels for the first 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. But then after a certain point, you enter into a state of metabolic distress, which can then turn into a much bigger deal and actually cause significant issues that are bigger than the problem that you tried to solve in the first place.
All right, man. I want to make like Dr. Emmett Brown and somehow conjure up 1.21 gigawatts of energy and go back in time to the 1920s when this research was first starting to hit the market. How in the world is it now that we're talking about centuries old data? And this is still such a novel concept to so many of us. What is this disconnect, man?
Yeah. Because we live in the matrix. That's why we live in a world in which having more information isn't necessarily the way to get people to make positive change. I mean, think about it. We live in a world of social media. Okay. We live in a world where there is more content generated per day than there has been at any moment in human history. The amount of information on the internet today is overwhelming, and no human can go through it. It's just impossible. Yet, despite the fact that there's more information, there's more confusion, there's more conflict, and the rates of chronic diseases, including diabetes, heart disease, and obesity, are now higher than they've ever been. So clearly, the amount of information does not actually correlate with the ability to make significant impacts in the health system. Okay. So the research, like you're saying, started back in the 1920s. That research actually started in rabbits, and then it was replicated in mice, and then it was replicated in rats, and then it was replicated in humans in the 1930s, and then in the 1950s, and the 1970s, and so on and so forth. So a lot of people look at the old research and they make these judgments about it. They say, number one, it's too old. It can't be right. It's just bad research. It's too old, which is a fundamentally wrong statement. Because just because something is old does not mean that the scientific methodology and the scientific process that was used to create the study in the first place is out of date or is bad. Okay. Number two, people always like to make this statement that, just because it was proven in a laboratory animal does not mean that it translates to human beings, which is also a fallacy because there's a lot of conservation of biology that happens between species. And no, humans are not rabbits. Humans are not mice. But the amount of overlap that we have in our biochemical machines between the rodents and monkeys and humans is actually very high. So you use these sort of test animals as a way to prove your hypothesis, and then you take these experiments and you repeat them on human beings. And if you can find the same result, then that's a good translational study because it demonstrates that it actually does carry over into humans. And this has been shown. It's been shown over and over and over again. Okay. So just because a study was performed in a clinical model does not necessarily mean that it's a bad piece of research. So people like to discount these types of research studies over and over and over and over again. But even, Dr. Neal Barnard from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and him and Dr. Kaliova have published multiple times on studies demonstrating that a predominantly plant-based diet or a vegan diet or a low-fat vegan diet or some combination thereof improves cardiometabolic disease risk, lowers insulin resistance, improves pancreatic function, lowers blood glucose, and beyond. And yet still, in today's world, people still debate it. It's mind-boggling.
It is just absolutely mind-boggling. But you know what? I mean, we just got to keep banging that drum and opening some more eyes. I honestly believe, even though I feel like we kind of operate in our own little health bubble from time to time, and it's easy to put blinders on. I still do feel like on a broader scale, the tide is starting to turn toward a healthier future for a lot of us, because we're starting to see the impact of the choices that we have made over these last 100 years or so, or even less than that, but that's a topic for another day. We still have 4 more tips to go. So let's go ahead and jump into number 2, which is kind of a refinement on that plant-based diet you were just talking about.
Okay. So tip number 1 is eat a diet that contains predominantly plant-based material. Tip number 2 is eat a diet that contains predominantly plant-based material that is low in fat. And it's a separate point altogether, because eating a plant-based diet is definitely something that can help lower chronic disease risk and lower your risk for diabetes and help you reverse the underlying disease processes that cause the insulin resistance problem in the first place. But when you lower your fat intake, especially if it comes from saturated fat that comes predominantly from animal sources, you give yourself a huge leg up, because insulin resistance, which is the underlying cause of prediabetes, which is the underlying cause of type 2 diabetes, which is the thing that affects 92% of the diabetes population. Okay? If you're trying to get to the root cause of insulin resistance, the answer is not about sugar. It's not about carbs. It's about excess dietary fat. So if you can lower your total fat intake to between 10 and 15% of total calories, or stated in another way, if you can lower your fat intake to approximately 30 grams per day or less, your chances of reversing insulin resistance go through the roof. That's what we wrote about in the Mastering Diabetes book. That's what we've been teaching people in our Mastering Diabetes coaching program. That is the most powerful lever that you can pull, that you have control over, that can significantly reduce your blood glucose, your fasting insulin level, your A1C level, and then also have ancillary benefits on lowering your blood pressure and your LDL cholesterol, both of which are associated with an increased risk for a future cardiac event. So if you want improved cardiometabolic health and you want to lower your risk for diabetes in particular, low fat is absolutely the way to go.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to me, because if you go to any grocery store in America now and you walk down the candy aisle, you see all of these candies that are marketed as being diabetic friendly. They have zero sugar in them, right? And so people, the majority of people, I think that if you eat, say, a Snickers bar, right, it's the sugar in the Snickers bar that's going to cause diabetes. But if you get the zero sugar Snickers, you're in the clear. But what it was you were just explaining is the sugar really doesn't, have too terribly much to do with it here.
Yeah, exactly right. So let's not oversimplify this, because you're absolutely right. Like the 0-calorie Snickers bar is probably the 0 sugar calorie bar is probably a better alternative than the, bar that contains sugar. But what I want people to understand here is that you can eat artificial sweeteners and you can add sugary substances to your diet, and you can add a lot of refined carbohydrate material, and your risk for chronic diseases will go up. It absolutely will. Your risk for prediabetes and type 2 diabetes will go up, because those foods will specifically impact your liver, and it will make your liver insulin resistant, which will then set in motion the development of prediabetes and type 2. Okay. However, there's a faster and more replicable way to do it. And the faster way to do it is to eat more saturated fat. The faster way to do it is to eat a higher saturated fat diet. The faster way to do it is the way that it's done in the research in mice and rats and rabbits and monkeys and human studies over and over and over and over and over again. And that is a high fat diet. We've seen it in the research. We see it in the public. That's the way that you can create insulin resistance in a very short period of time. And when you do it that way, which is what most Americans are doing, but yet unaware, that's the thing that actually increases chronic disease risk in the long term.
All right, we hit the midway point here. We've got eat the predominantly plant-based diet. Now we've got eat a predominantly plant-based diet that is lower in fat, less in calories. Number 3 on your list, Mr. Khambatta, please.
Number 3, here we go. It's another variation. It's eat a predominantly plant-based diet that contains as much whole food material as possible. Now, I really want to hammer this point home as well. So I talked about eating plant material is good. Eating plant material that's low in fat is good. Eating plant material that's low in fat but is whole is very important, because when you go to the grocery store, there's a whole bunch of material, there's a whole bunch of, quote unquote, vegan foods that you can buy. And they come in packages, they come in boxes, they come in bottles, right? They're things like cookies and crackers and burritos and chips and pastas and sodas, and even beverages that don't have artificial sweeteners in them and or don't have any animal-based foods in them. So technically speaking, these are all vegan foods, right? But just because they're vegan does not make them healthy. These are vegan junk foods, or vegan processed foods, if you will. I'm not telling you to eat those foods, okay? I don't eat any of those foods. I haven't eaten those foods for 20 years, and I don't plan on eating those foods anytime soon. What I'm talking about is eating whole foods, fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. I'll repeat that. Fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. If you can base your diet in those 4 food categories and eat as much whole food as possible, you will add yet another layer of disease reversing power to your diet that's going to have a significant impact in lowering your blood glucose and reversing the insulin resistance process that causes blood glucose dysregulation.
I love the fact that you went back. You're like, let me say that again. Because when you say fruit and you're talking about fruit and diabetes in the same sentence, people's ears, they just perk up to this day. I mean,
Yeah.
anytime you and I do a show where we talk about fruits that are safe for people who are living with diabetes, a lot of people tune in. I mean, the numbers on these things are extraordinary. And this too is something that just doesn't get talked about too much among, a lot of people out there. I wish that more people who had diabetes understood that, it's okay to eat that apple. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think the problem, I mean, I remember back in 2002 when I first made this transition, I felt the exact same way because when I was living in an insulin resistant state because I was eating predominantly animal food based diet, in that scenario, adding a fruit on top of that doesn't work. When you add an apple to an animal based diet, your blood glucose goes up. When you add a banana to a predominantly animal based diet, your blood glucose goes up. And so that's what a lot of people do is they say, Cyrus, you're lying to me because I just ate a banana and now my blood glucose went high. It's the banana's fault. And I say, no, 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 no. You're not doing what I'm telling you to do. I'm telling you to, number one, lower your intake of dietary fat first and do that and keep that constant for at least a week, if not 2 weeks. And then only then can you start to add more carbohydrate rich material. If you want to start adding fruits at that point, then you can add 1 fruit, 2 fruits, 3 fruits, 4 fruits, 10 fruits per day, and your blood glucose won't go up the way that you think it will. And the only reason that's happening is because you've already previously lowered your fat content. And I am a walking, I've been doing this now for 20 plus years. And I kid you not, on average, I eat 20 pieces of fruit per day. So you do the math on that. 20 pieces of fruit per day is like 7,000 some odd per year times 20 years. I've eaten 150,000 pieces of fruit over the last 20 years. And my A1C is between 5.3 and 5.7, and it's not going anywhere.
Ooh, that is a lot of fruit, dude. You're getting a
fruit.
ton of antioxidants.
Yep.
The last time you were on the show, we were talking about this. Somebody wrote in after the fact and were like, well, what about drinking fruit juice after you've brought your fat content down? No fiber in that. What would your recommendation be there?
Yeah, so fruit juices are something that I definitely want to make sure people understand. We are not necessarily a huge proponent of drinking fruit juice. And the reason for that is because fruit juice doesn't contain a very essential component that is present in whole foods called fiber. Dr. Will Bulsiewicz has written about this in Fiber Fueled, and it's the central thesis of not only that book, but many other books in the whole food nutrition world. Fiber is a very important nutrient in your food. There are many different types of fiber, and the more diverse your collection of fiber that comes into your mouth, the better strength your microbiome has, the more powerful the diversity inside of your microbiome can become. And as a result of that, it can help secrete short chain fatty acids, which then improve the health of all tissues. If you subtract fiber from the equation, then what you're doing is you're eating a technically refined version of fruit. You're taking all the sweetness out of the fruit, but you're not taking any of the fiber that comes along with it. And as a result of that, your blood glucose is likely to go up, and it's likely to go up pretty quickly. Okay. If you have a small amount and you happen to drink a little bit of fruit juice inside of a larger meal that contains fiber, okay, fine. You can dilute it, but I would not get into the habit of trying to drink a glass of fruit juice on a regular basis, especially if it's not with a meal, because then you're going to run into trouble.
Somebody also asked, and I don't even know if they've done research on this, whether there would be a lower impact on blood sugar levels if somebody were to drink orange juice that has pulp in it versus orange juice that has had all of the pulp removed because of what it was you were just talking about, fiber.
Yeah, the answer is yes, but a very, very, very small effect. So yeah, having the fiber inside of the orange juice is going to be better than having no fiber in it. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking that that's like a safe way to do it. I'd rather you just eat the orange.
Nothing wrong with that.
Do that. Get all the fiber. There's no reason to avoid it.
Do you know that Dr. Bulsiewicz has an orange tree at his house now?
Does he really?
He does. He was like, when he was on the show last week, he was just talking about how his son came all excited into the house a couple of months ago with an orange that he had picked off of the tree. He said it was absolutely delicious. Who knew?
It's funny because when I grew up back in Palo Alto in the like 1980s and 1990s, we had an orange tree in the courtyard, and then we had a pomegranate tree in the backyard. And, I just kind of grew up eating both of those fruits, and I was like, man, these things are really tasty. Right. And then it wasn't until 20 years later, 30 years later, where I was like, man, those are such tasty, but yet very health promoting foods that I wasn't even aware of at the time. And it's good that you develop those habits early.
Dude, that's epic. Yeah, dude, you really did. You just got your taste for them at a far younger age than a lot of us do.
Yeah, it's so true.
We've been talking a lot about food. Let's talk about something else. I know that exercise has cracked your list at number 4.
Absolutely. Exercise for 30 minutes per day, every day. You're allowed to have 1 day off per week. So my prescription is exercise for a minimum of 30 minutes per day, hopefully closer to 60 if possible. And you're allowed to have 1 rest day. Now, when you exercise, I don't need you to go out to the gym. I don't need you to pound yourself into the ground. I don't need you to get so out of breath that it's so uncomfortable and you don't want to do it over again. Okay. There's a lot of information on the internet that the only type of exercise that's actually effective for improving your metabolic health is this stuff called HIIT working out, or HIIT workouts, called high intensity interval training. Okay. High intensity interval training can definitely be very, very powerful, but it is only necessary. It's only applicable to a very small proportion of the population who has been doing exercise training for many, 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 many years leading up to it. Instead of trying to go into the high intensity regime, what I would recommend is exercising at a medium intensity for approximately 30 minutes. You can do cardiovascular exercise like walking or jogging. You can also play team sports like basketball or soccer or hockey. You can also go to the gym if you want, and you can do weightlifting, or you can do a group fitness class. It doesn't really matter. All I want is for your heart rate to get elevated. And the real test, in my opinion, as to whether or not you're exercising is you should find it hard to hold a conversation with somebody. So when you're in the middle of exercise, if your phone were to ring and somebody would be like, hey, Janet, I want to talk with you because we need to talk about this business thing, you should basically be like, you know what? I can't talk right now. Got to go. We'll talk later. Hang up. Okay. If you can hold a conversation, you're not exercising. Okay. I want you to be just enough out of breath that it's hard to either have a conversation or hard to sing a song. And if that's the case, then that's a good indicator that you're exercising at a decent enough pace. And if you can hold that constant for about 30 minutes or so, then you're going to do yourself a significant, you're going to give yourself a big gift on a daily basis by improving your brain function, your cardiovascular function, your liver function, your kidney function, and improving the condition of your muscles simultaneously.
Outside the box kind of question here. I mean, but you're talking about doing that for a half an hour. If somebody has been a complete sedentary couch potato for years at this point, you're not going to go 30 minutes straight out of the gate. It's okay to ramp up.
It's absolutely okay. Thank you. It's okay to ramp up. And if you want to take 3 months to get to the point where you're exercising for 30 minutes a day, that's fine. There's no rush. There's literally no rush. And secondarily, if you want to split that exercise up into smaller pieces and you want to do like 10 minutes now and 10 minutes a little bit later and 10 minutes a little bit later, I'm okay with that too. It's totally fine. I just want you to be doing something active for a minimum of 30 minutes per day. And when you can do that, it has a very powerful insulin sensitizing effect, which can help lower your blood glucose and lower your insulin concentrations simultaneously.
So I got a new treadmill here at the house, and it's one of the, cooler models. And I've got all of these fitness programs I can do. And I tried that interval training. I hadn't done that in quite some time. And boy, my glute muscle straight away was like, nope, you got to work up to this. You got to work up to this, son. And
yep.
Yeah. I was
need a little bit of practice.
A little bit over the holidays with a little limp on my right cheek there.
Yeah, it's no joke. I mean, sometimes you need a rude awakening to recognize you're like, oh, wow, I have to do a lot more base training in order to get to this point. But it's also motivating because you're like, hey, if I want to do that, I got to put in the effort and then I'll eventually get back there. It's all cool.
Oh yeah. No, I'm good with it. I mean, I'm good to go now, man, but it was like, woo-hoo-hoo. Yeah, man, not right out of the gate. Not right out of the gate. We're going to dial it back to the intermediate level. Not going to go crazy with the advanced stuff straight away.
That's exactly right.
Speaking of intermediate and intermittent, talking about fasting here in that regard is the 5th and final tip that you have for us. A lot of people are big on fasting here now. In terms of controlling your insulin resistance, how does fasting factor in?
Okay. Intermittent fasting is a thing that you can do that mimics calorie restriction. So let's take a quick trip back to the 1930s. There was a researcher named Clive McKay who started experimenting with calorie restriction, and he took mice and he restricted their food intake by 10% and tried to figure out what effect it would have on them. And lo and behold, lowering their caloric intake increased their lifespan. Very unexpected. They were like, wait, what? We fed them less food and they lived longer? Then they did another experiment. They said, well, what if we restricted by 25%? They restricted by 25%. They lived even longer. 30%, even longer. 50%, even longer. Repeated this process over and over again. And they eventually determined that you can restrict the intake, the caloric intake of animals by up to 60%, and you will still push their longevity. They'll be alive for a longer period of time. These experiments were repeated in multiple different species, okay? Intermittent fasting works in yeast, flies, worms, mice, rats, monkeys, and humans, okay? It's the most conserved, what's the word I'm looking for? Nutritional intervention that's ever been studied, that has shown that in every single species study to date, lowering your calorie intake has tremendous benefits on your brain health, on your thyroid health, on your liver health, on your heart health, on your vascular health, on your kidney health, on your sexual function, on your skin health, on your muscle health, you name it. There's almost no tissue that doesn't benefit from lower calorie intake. The problem is that calorie restriction is kind of hard. It's kind of boring. And it's not that fun to not eat food. So intermittent fasting is a way to mimic calorie restriction. And the way that we recommend doing it is by doing what's called a 16-8 intermittent fast. So that means that you fast for 16 hours a day and then you eat for 8 hours a day. So you're effectively compressing your eating window to being an 8-hour window. And when you do it that way, you can eat to satiation and you can feel good. And the 16 hours of fasting that does include your sleep, it kind of passes. It's not even that difficult to do. And we've seen tremendous benefits from the people that have come through our coaching program. When they do it, they end up losing weight faster. They end up lowering their fasting insulin levels and their post-meal insulin levels. They lower their A1C values. They lower their fasting glucose. They lower their post-meal everything. They become less insulin resistant. They've gotten off of many cardiovascular medications, statin medications, gotten off of blood pressure medication, and their lives improve in ways that they never even thought were possible. So if you don't have intermittent fasting inside of your regimen, I highly, highly recommend integrating it in. And it's just another thing that you can do in addition to a plant-based diet, in addition to exercise, that's going to have a very powerful impact on reversing the insulin resistance metabolic condition.
Couple follow-ups here on this. When you're talking about fasting and condensing that eating window, if somebody's unfamiliar with this, does that mean that they should be focusing on more calorically dense meals to make sure that they're still hitting that 2000, or how should they really approach eating at that point?
Okay. So when you are eating food in that 8-hour window, okay, I don't necessarily want you to try and eat with a calculator in your hand. Okay. Human beings were never designed to have to use a calorie tracker in their phone in order to figure out how much food to eat. Okay. We've just kind of developed this habit because a lot of people are overweight and they don't exactly know how much calories are in their food. Okay. So what I want you to do instead is I want you to become a more intuitive eater. I want you to eat until you're about 80% full and then stop eating. It's just that simple. Okay. I don't really care how many calories you put into your body, right? And I don't mean to be crass when I say that, but if you have a particular calorie requirement and you're trying to get that calorie requirement in 8 hours, chances are it's going to be relatively hard for you to get to that calorie requirement. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you're trying to hit 2,000 calories within an 8-hour window. Okay. I mean, you could certainly do that. You could go above 2,000 calories, but chances are what intermittent fasting does is it condenses your eating window such that when you try and get to that 2,000 calorie marker, you end up actually undershooting it. And then you end up losing a couple of calories here and there, 200 calories today, 200 calories tomorrow, 300 calories the next day. And that translates to weight loss in the long term. Okay. So don't eat like a calculator, eat like a human. Okay. Eat like an animal would eat in the wild. They eat a little bit of food and then they relax. Then maybe they eat a little bit of food a little bit later and then they relax. Okay. If you can do that and you can have maybe 2 meals, maybe 3 meals within an 8-hour window and just not eat until you're overly satiated, then what you're likely to find is that you actually induce a negative calorie balance, which is what's going to translate to weight loss and improved insulin sensitivity. That's the goal. And if you can do that, and you can do that over the course of time, then you're setting yourself up for significant improvements.
Yeah. And so here's something else. A lot of us, you were just kind of hinting at this though, still subscribe to the theory that you should eat small meals frequently. If somebody really is just kind of grazing throughout the day, getting something every 2 hours, every 90 minutes, something like that, What effect might that have on their insulin resistance, or is it totally dependent upon the type of food that they're eating?
Okay, that's a great question. So it's dependent on the amount of food that they're consuming, it's dependent on the type of food that they're eating, and it's dependent on the timing of the food that they're eating. So you're right in the sense that all three of those things matter. There's no question about it. But if we're going to try and answer one particular question, which is it better to eat, let's say you have an 8-hour eating window, is it smarter to eat one meal at the beginning of the 8 hours and maybe one meal towards the end? Or is it smarter to eat 4 different meals spaced out about, call it 2 hours apart from one another within that 8-hour window? And the answer is, what the research demonstrates is that the former is better. Okay. The former is better, meaning have one larger meal at the beginning and one larger meal at the end, because time is your friend. Your digestive system benefits from not digesting food. You do know, if you are snacking on food consistently, then what that means, they say in the scientific world, that you're in a chronic state of postprandial metabolism. What the heck does that mean? It means that most of the time, your digestive system is trying to digest and transport nutrients. Okay. Postprandial basically just means after a meal. So if you're constantly asking your digestive system to work and work and work and work and work and not give it the rest that it actually should be given, then you end up you increase your risk for many disease processes. And as a result of that, if you switch your eating pattern to being, instead of snacking all the time, to having a larger meal and then a longer state of rest where you're not in a postprandial metabolism, and then another larger meal, you give yourself the opportunity to turn your digestive system off. That's what you want. When your digestive system is off, good things happen in all tissues. That's why the fasting period of 16 hours is effective. But even within that 8-hour window, if you can turn on and turn off, that's going to also benefit you in the long term.
All right, let's roll through these 5 one more time as we wrap up here. Start with eating a plant-based diet. That's number 1. Number 2, take that plant-based diet and also drop the fat, drop the calories by about 15% less. That sound about right? Number
Exactly right.
3, whole foods. Eat as many whole foods as you possibly can in your diet. They are your friend. 4, lace up them sneakers. Get out there, exercise. 30 minutes a day is key. 1 day off a week. That's very generous of you. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who say thank you right now. And then number 5, intermittent fasting. Try to work in that 16-8 window. So get all your food in that 8-hour window and then give your gut a break, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Give your
man.
gut a break. That's a good thing. That's a good way to do it.
Love it, man. Cyrus Khambatta, thank you so much, my friend. What do you have cooking up right now at Mastering Diabetes?
Yeah, we got some oatmeal, a little bit of, that was a joke. Here's what we got. At Mastering Diabetes, what we do is we teach people how to change their diet to eating a more low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet. So, we wrote a book called Mastering Diabetes. You can go get it on Amazon, and you can read that book and you can change your life just by following the directions inside. What a lot of people have told us is that it's hard. It's hard to do. Okay, the information is like straightforward, but the actual implementation can be challenging because you have emotions, you have things that, like, patterns that you've developed over the course of time. You got family, you got friends, you got coworkers, you have school, you got logistics, you got your exercise regimen, and all of a sudden, before you know it, it becomes too complicated. So what we've developed is a coaching program that is designed to hold your hand and take you from the starting point where you are right now and get you to do a full transition over to a plant-based ecosystem. And by doing that, we guarantee in our coaching system that by pairing you up with an accountability coach that's going to show you exactly how to make this transition over the course of time, we will help you attain your ideal body weight. We will help you lower your A1C value, and we will help you get significant improvements in your overall metabolic health. We've seen this over and over and over again. We've worked with over 10,000 people over the course of time, and we've seen unbelievable life-changing stories. Okay, I get up every single morning because I want to help as many people as possible. And if you're sitting on the fence and you're not sure, maybe I should do this, maybe I shouldn't do this, I'm not sure, maybe I don't know what to do. How do I start? What do I buy? What do I not buy? Go to our website, masteringdiabetes.org. And on the top bar, just click on personalized coaching. Just click on that, fill out a form, talk to somebody on our team. If you're a good fit for the program, come to the program. We will help you change your life, and you will be the best version of yourself, and we guarantee it.
And you got some green tea too, don't you? I got to hear about this green tea.
We do. We actually have, so we have another company called Amla Green, AMLA Green, and it basically is a tea that contains Indian gooseberries. Indian gooseberries are the world's most powerful antioxidant food, very powerful at lowering cholesterol, blood pressure, and blood glucose, all three of them together. So if you're interested in incorporating this tea into your lifestyle, which we have been getting rave reviews from people who have been, putting this into their lifestyle, lowering their cholesterol values, getting off of statin medication, lowering their blood pressure, lowering their blood glucose, and quite honestly, just having more energy. Who doesn't want that? Okay. If you're interested in that, go to amlagreen.com, AMLA green.com. There you can learn more about it and get this in your hands, try it out. And if you don't love it, send it back. We'll give you a refund.
Amla Green. That's like a DJ name. Hey, everybody, I'm Amla Green, and here are the hits. That was so stupid. Anyway, that's what happens when you come on the show, man. Thank you so much for your time, dude. This has been great. I love the way that, again, you're just able to put all of this information into digestible bites, and everybody can grasp it, and everybody can improve their health. And for that, I am eternally grateful to you, my friend, the Exam Room Health All-Star.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it. You've done such an incredible job trying to get information to people who really need it. And the fact that you can get this out to so many people and really change lives means a lot to me. So thank you again for inviting me to come back to the show. I love it.
Absolutely. And look, we still have a lot of other shows coming up in our Health All-Star series. I mean, so far we've spoken with Colin Campbell, Doctors Michael Greger and Neal Barnard. Rep Esselstyn was here last week. So was our friend, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. Still to come, we're talking about one of the masters of longevity from the Blue Zones, Dan Buettner, coming up here on the Exam Room All-Stars series. We also have Dr. Gemma Newman coming up, the plant power doc. She's going to be here. And then the doc who is leading the plant-based diet revolution, Dr. Alan Desmond, will also be on the program here this week to wrap up our All-Star series. But it would not be a series at all, again, without you, my friend. Thank you, Cyrus Khambatta. You are the man.
Thanks for time, my man. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you so very much to the crew behind the scenes for making the magic happen today. And to you, Exam Roomies, thanks for raising your health IQ with us and spreading this healthy, delicious information to take your health to the next level. For everybody here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, keep it plant-based.